Today we have some crime movies here, and there's some action crime movies, some drama crime movies, but all around, all excellent 4Ks. Now, if you're looking at upgrading your collection from Blu-ray to 4K and getting these movies, if you have any of them, I did order them, so if it's going to be the smallest upgrade to the greatest upgrade, and that's how we kind of did it. I ranked them a little bit, so we're going to start off. Number 10 is going to be the smallest upgrade, but still an overall excellent picture. If you don't have any of these films at all and you're looking at starting your 4K collection, it's a great way to start, and I would highly recommend picking up the 4Ks on all of these. Now, number 10 here is The Man from Nowhere. Now, this is something that really surprised me. I happened to just drive out to the Best Buy, which is a good distance from me. It was right at that time where they stopped carrying movies in stores. Well, altogether, they stopped carrying movies, and I wasn't leaving without something, and this just happened to be on the shelf. There was like, I think maybe 4 or 5 titles in a little cardboard cutout that just movies I had most of all of those, or I didn't really care for them. But this one here is something I had never saw. It was a blind buy. Excellent pickup. I'm glad I did, but I highly recommend this one. If you like action, you like crime movies. Now, this one here is a foreign film, and it does have the English subtitles, but also does have an English language track. With having both options to listen to this, whether you want to read the subtitles or listen to the English language track, I think it just gives you an opportunity to really enjoy something maybe a little bit outside your comfort zone or your wheelhouse. But if you like action, you like crime, I highly recommend this one. Now, the main character here, it stars I don't even want to mess up his name. So, the main character, he is an agent that, kind of retired, kind of doing his own thing, really, under the radar. And, we've seen these types of movies before, but he lives in this, kind of a not so great neighborhood. Some drugs are going on, bad guys all over the place. But then something happens in his building and he just can't stand by. So he takes it upon himself to kind of save the day and, take these drug dealers out. And it's just an excellent film. I really highly recommend this one. Highly enjoyable, but it makes number 10 on the list because it is just a small uptick from the Blu-ray. Number 9 on my list is Red Heat. Now, this is just an excellent overall film. I really enjoyed it. Directed by Walter Hill, came out in the 80s, and you have this just great buddy cop story with Arnold Schwarzenegger's character being from Russia. And at that time, the Berlin Wall just came down. And I mean, I don't even know if this movie came out before that actual incident. I just don't remember. I haven't looked it up in a while. But you have that whole time period where the Cold War was still kind of there, and the wall just came down, and everybody's kind of heightened about the relations between America and Russia. So you have this stereotypical Russian cop who's trying to nix the drugs that are coming into Russia. He goes after this bad guy who ends up going to America. Then he meets the stereotypical American cop, Jim Belushi. And I like the whole buddy cop dynamic between the two and the whole different takes that both of these guys played, their characters. Now, this is considered a comedic film. Now, it's not like an Eddie Murphy film. This is not like Beverly Hills Cop, but it has some comedic moments.
Everything okay?
Yes, fine. No problems.
What about that sack of shit laying on the sidewalk?
He lives here.
And I do want to note that I only had the VHS, so for me, this was a huge upgrade, and I really enjoyed the 4K. Now, after I watched the Blu-ray, and I noticed that it was a small uptick in quality, one thing I do want to note on the 4K was there's one scene where the bad guys are coming in from outside to inside, and when they go inside, that entire shot was done, and it has some film grain in it. And it's not a bad transfer, which a couple people have pointed out. You actually look, that's how the film was recorded. So that film grain was present in that scene in the older versions of it, just not as noticeable. Now, the 4K really does amplify that, but it's only one scene. And again, it's how it was recorded. Like when you get film grain, it's just lack of light. So it has nothing to do with the transfer on this, but I do know that some people were kind of complaining about that. But if you don't like it, it does have the Blu-ray, and that scene is not as noticeable at all. Really enjoy this one, though. High recommend. Now, the next two here they're good. They're excellent transfers. They're beautiful picture, but from going from the Blu-ray to the 4K, I think that these are good, just not as dramatic. Not a huge jump, not like a mind-blowing thing. So if you're going to upgrade these, definitely wait for a sale. If you don't have them in your collection, jump on the 4Ks because they are excellent. And so number 8 is American Gangster, starring Denzel Washington, Russell Crowe, and it's a little bit different story than your normal mob story. Normally, we're bombarded with the Italian mafia and that whole story. There's so many great stories there, but this is the black mob in Harlem in the 70s. Denzel Washington's part of that as they're bringing heroin into the country from the Vietnam War. 4K on here, if you already have the Blu-ray, it's a good upgrade. It's not, the best. It's not a, amazing jump in quality and for the sound and the picture. Now, the sound on this, on the Blu-ray, it had a DTS 5.1 master audio, where this one adds a DTS-X 5.1 master audio. So just a small upgrade in audio, a good upgrade in quality for your picture. So this is something that if you already have the Blu-ray, definitely wait for a sale. But if you don't have this in your collection, I highly recommend it.
Where's my money? Red Top gave you the package. You're supposed to be handing me my money. Here's a jar right here, 20%.
Oh, you got the jar?
That's right.
Get the fuck out of here, Frank. Oh, what you gonna do? What the fuck you gonna do, Frank? Huh? What you doing? You gonna shoot me in front of everybody? Huh? Come on.
Number 7 is Casino. This is one of my all-time favorite gangster movies. Probably hits my top 5 easily, but even then, it probably is higher up there between 1 and 2, depending on Goodfellas or Donnie Brasco. Like, I like some of those too. I have to actually go through and rank them one day. I've never really done that, but I know this is easily my top 5. Probably one of the most watched gangster films in my collection. I've had it since I started watching the film. And when I first grabbed this, I remembered reading, the story behind this back in the newspaper when I was a teenager. They had that whole thing where they were finding the bodies in the desert. And that's what this is based on. So the mob goes out to Vegas. They kind of take over the casinos. There's racketeering. There's murder. There's bodies in the desert. There's that whole thing. And this is just an excellent overall film. Stars Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Sharon Stone's in this film. It's just great. And if you've never seen it, highly recommend it. Now, this is a long 3-hour movie, but worth every minute of it. And when it first came out, I didn't get it right away, and I didn't watch it right away. But when I did, they had the 5-day rental. And so I rented it for the 5 days, and I watched it every single day. And a 3-hour movie every single day. I still ended up running out and buying this shortly afterwards, and I've had it in my collection ever since. And I upgraded from VHS to DVD, from DVD to Blu-ray, and now to the 4K. And while I think it's just a great version to have on the 4K, the Blu-ray had a solid transfer. So the Blu-ray was really good, and it had great sound. So the upgrade on here for the sound is a very small, mediocre uptick, where you have the original Blu-ray had the DTS 5.1. This one here adds the DTS-X 5.1. Where I think this movie really shines on the 4K is adding the HDR, and that's just the high dynamic range. If your TV doesn't have it, you're not going to notice it, obviously. If you have an older 4K player that doesn't have the feature, you're not going to notice it. And I know I've talked to a lot of people and not even realizing that they don't have the feature, complaining that the HDR, the Dolby Vision, may or may not look better for them. I think that this one right here, I think it adds a little bit. I have had some films with the HDR, the Dolby Vision, kind of tweaks with the colors just enough where it kind of throws it out of whack for me. But with this Casino 4K, I really did enjoy it. I thought it was an excellent overall watch, and it's just something that on the 4K, it's my preferred version to watch it, even though I still have my previous versions. This is something that I absolutely love. Now we're going to dive into excellent upgrades. Now this is something that, whether it's, a little bit upgrade on the sound, I think that the picture is just absolutely top notch and a huge improvement over the Blu-ray. And number 6 is something that I've heard quite a few people complain about it. And one, I think most people on the internet over-exaggerate things for clicks. But this right here, I'm old enough to have watched it from the beginning, and I've watched it on every single format. And I think that this is the very best possible picture, the best way it's ever looked. And it was a movie that was shot on film, but people have been talking about the way this was shot for a very long time. You can go back through years of people talking about this on the internet, and where the original Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff, they had this look to it, but it's a consistent look. So that's the way the movie was recorded. We're talking about Goodfellas. Now, this is just, for me, a top-notch film. I absolutely love it, but I've watched this on every single format since it came out, and this is the very best possible version. I think this is an amazing picture, excellent upgrade in quality. Now, if you don't like film grain, you're going to have this, but you also have film grain on the Blu-ray. The 4K is going to make it stand out a little bit more, but it's something that it's shot on film. It's going to have film grain. That's just an actual thing that's there. Now, certain TVs have some DNR built in where you can kind of adjust that digitally through your own television. But overall, if you don't mind film grain, you love this film, I think it's an amazing picture and just top notch. Now, as far as the film goes, it's one of my favorites and easily hits my top, in my top 5, like I said before. But Goodfellas is just something I think everybody should own. And if you're going to get any film, get this 4K, something you're going to really enjoy. And it does have the Blu-ray on there. So if it's something that, you're concerned that maybe the film grain might bother you or might not, there also is the Blu-ray. So something that, to note, pick up the 4K, you'll get both options. But I absolutely love it. And the 4K is the definitive version. It's the way I've been watching the film ever since I got this 4K. But if you've never seen this one, just another great true story, really enjoyable, and Scorsese, I think, just knocked it out of the park. And I know there's some people that love this movie and some people that hate this movie, but this one for me is always a high recommend.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Hi, Mom. What do you think? Look at my shoes. Aren't they great?
My God. You look like a gangster.
Now, the very next one here on my list is something that it came out in the 90s, and as far as crime films, it's very high on my list. And as far as Quentin Tarantino films, it's easily in my top 5. Now, this is something that it comes beloved by lots of people. This has been talked about, I think, to death. So I don't think I can add anything to that conversation other than this 4K, I think, is a huge upgrade over the Blu-ray. Now, the sound we're going to talk about is a very subtle, small upgrade, but it's a noticeable difference. Where this one here shines is the Dolby Vision. If you don't have Dolby Vision, you don't have it on your TV, you don't have it on your 4K, of course you're not going to be able to take full advantage of that. But this one right here is something that when I turn off the Dolby Vision and I turn it back on, like just the night and day difference, that right there adds a huge vibrance to the color palette that's already in this film. Really enjoyed this one. And some people are going to say, well, it was shot in this warehouse looking room and it's kind of dark and gray and everybody's wearing black suits. What kind of color what kind of color vibrance are you talking about? Oh, the blood. The blood is extremely vibrant in this movie. Just a really enjoyable 4K, and overall one of my favorite films. Really enjoy this one, and easily in my top 25 favorite films of all time, but very high on the list for many other lists. Really enjoy this one. High recommend. Number 4 is something that came out in the early 80s. So this movie's probably about as old as I am, but it wasn't until the early 2000s where I found it at the video rental store and I rented it. I absolutely love this film, and it wasn't until then where that's when I started noticing people talk about it a little bit more or just quoting it.
Say hello to my little friend.
But this one right here, Scarface, it's Brian De Palma's, one of my top 5 favorite Brian De Palma films. Al Pacino's in this one, Michelle Pfeiffer, just a great overall story. Another long one. Really enjoyed this one. I think the DVD you had to flip over to get to the other side. I think this one kind of paused at that time, and I'm pretty sure that if you had it on VHS, it was the same thing where you pop one tape in and then it's done. You got to pop the other tape in halfway through. But I'm pretty sure my DVD you had to flip over just to watch the other half of the film. It's a very long one, but really enjoyed this one. So Pacino's character, he comes from Cuba. He was a criminal over there. He's a refugee. And then he kind of becomes this like lowly American worker who builds his way up to becoming the biggest drug kingpin in Miami. This is something that I can watch anytime, and it just kind of, with age, it gets better. I've really enjoyed this one over the years, but the 4K on this, I think, really shines. I don't think that the sound has a huge upgrade, but it was noticeable. It was something that, as I watched it again, it just, everything kind of sang through my speakers, and it just kind of worked. worked. Now, it was just a very small upgrade. It wasn't anything that was just crazy, but it was noticeable. And the 4K on this, the transfer, excellent, and the HDR adds just enough where I think there's a huge improvement over the Blu-ray. Number 3 is something that it came out in the 90s, and I completely missed out on it. And I was fully aware of it. I saw the trailers a bunch of times. I remember flipping the channels on cable back in the 90s and seeing the one iconic scene. And, I've seen it a couple times. But the actual whole movie, I missed the entire thing. I just kind of wasn't into it. I was a teenager. But as I've grown older, I know that my movie tastes have changed. So when this got a 4K announcement, it was a day one purchase for me, and I absolutely love it. And it's one of the few films that my wife actually saw and I didn't, and she's not a big movie person. So the fact that she actually saw this film and liked it was just, kind of funny to me. So then when I got the 4K, it doesn't have a Blu-ray in here. It did have a digital code. So I actually had to track down a Blu-ray to do the comparison. And luckily there was a copy at my used bookstore. So I was able to do the comparison on it. And I think it was a huge upgrade. So the reality is this film right here, The Fugitive, top notch. It's one of my favorites. It's a crime drama. And, the entire thing, Harrison Ford, Tommy Lee Jones, but just, great story. The one-armed man kills his wife and he says that constantly. Nobody believes him. And so he gets arrested for the crime, and then something happens and he's on the lam. He's running from the cops. He's trying to solve his own his own wife murder. And so this is something that I love the film. I highly recommend it, but the 4K on here is absolutely top notch. There's a Dolby Atmos track, so you're going to get an experience with the surround sound. Number 2 on the list is something that it doesn't add a lot to the sound. I think it's the exact same surround soundtrack. I didn't notice any huge difference, but the quality from Blu-ray to 4K in the image, absolutely amazing. It adds some HDR, and this is just something that one, I think should be in everyone's collection. If you're into crime dramas, obviously if you're not into that type of film, then clearly you don't need it. But this is something I think everyone should watch. And it's a high recommend for me all the time. And it's just a macho man movie, but it has this whole aesthetic to it. And having the HDR on here, I think is just honestly probably in my all-time favorite 4K reference discs. I think it's just that perfect. And we're talking about Heat. Now, this is a 1990s film. It stars Val Kilmer, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino's in this one, and Michael Mann wrote and directed this one. So this is something that it's been in my collection for a very long time. Love this one. And even though the 4K on this is just top notch, going back to the Blu-ray, still pretty good, but I think there's a huge quality difference. High recommend.
And you got your head all the way up it.
Number 1 on the list is probably on this list is my number 1. But as far as Tarantino films, this probably makes my number 2 overall favorite Tarantino film. But so far on the 4K, this is my absolute favorite. And we're talking about Pulp Fiction. This one came out in the 90s. And I know there are people that love this film. It's a cult classic that's kind of gone a little bit more than a cult classic. And there's people that don't love this film, but I love this film. I think the HDR on this 4K just kind of takes all the visuals that were already there and makes everything pop. A noticeable difference from the Blu-ray to the 4K. And the sound also had, nice clarity. I don't know if it was a huge upgrade, but the visuals were outstanding. Definitely a reference disc. High on my list, high recommend. If you've never seen this one, it's just a great crime drama. It's been quoted to death. Everyone talks about this one, but this is one of my all-time favorites. The bonus disc is something that I think everyone should have in their collection at some point, but I gave it to you as a bonus because I just thought that those 10 were solid, good starts for any crime collection. But this one here, I think is just a must, and that's why I wasn't going to hit it home in the top 10. I think you should just have this movie, and it's The Departed. Now, this is something that on the 4K, I thought it was a huge upgrade from the Blu-ray. But the sound quality, I noticed that it was crystal clear. I really enjoyed it. When I got this film, though, I had thought that the Blu-ray was coming like a lot of the movies have it. So I actually turned in my Blu-ray. I just happened to be going to the bookstore and I traded it in. So when I got this, I didn't have much to compare it on. So I was going off of memory. So my memory is the picture quality is great, and there's a huge upgrade from the, with the HDR, especially in the darker scenes. but the sound quality I thought was crystal clear and sharp, but I just don't remember what was originally on that Blu-ray. But something that the picture quality was super noticeable to me because I had recently watched it getting in preparation for this to come into the house. So something that I had kind of fresh in my brain, but I still was pulling from memory. But a high recommend. Really enjoy this, and I think the 4K is just top notch. Now, I actually didn't mind what they did here with the cover art, because even though you got the characters and their faces, it's a little different. Now, it's very simple, but it's also a little different than just slamming their faces and what we originally had from this. But really enjoyed the entire presentation, and the fact that there's no ugly banner saying that it had a 4K and it had the digital code inside. So this entire thing for me was just top notch. Really enjoyed it. High recommend. It was just 10 must-own crime movies on 4K that I think everybody could add to their collection at some point, whether you're just starting out or you are upgrading. If you want to check out some more 4K recommendations, watch this video right here. And with that, remember to watch a movie today, and I'll catch you guys next time.